Well, welcome back to Cocktail Party Economic Conversations. I am thrilled to have as our guest Lauren Langille from GM. We are thrilled to have her because we're talking about chapter 6, which is supply side. And in that chapter, we spend a little bit of time talking about the auto sector, which is a very important sector in North America. And Lauren works with them. So, welcome to our program, Lauren.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Hi, Lauren. It's Rick Maranta. I work with Evie on the book. I'm just going to ask you a bit about your company and what you do, and then I'm just get a little sense of your journey from University of Guelph to there where you are now.
Sure.
Um, Finance communications at General Motors. It sounds like a really challenging thing. Like especially these days, communications is probably under a lot of pressure on like all fronts. Like I'm sure there are people that aren't doing much in an organization, and there's people doing a lot. And I think communications has got to be a big sort of hot uh, area to work in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's of course a lot of crisis management right now. There always seems to be in communications, but you can never predict a global pandemic to the scale that we're looking at today. So uh, we've been very, very busy, not only in financial communications, but in communications at the whole company. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride for the past 6 to 8 months.
So what's the top of your to-do list these days in terms of financial communications?
So with financial communications, my role um, it's to look at the numbers that are coming in and craft a narrative about what the numbers mean for our investor community, for media, for customers, for dealerships, for all of our external parties, policymakers. Um, I'm basically giving context to numbers.
Mhm.
So the biggest part of my job is preparing all of the communication materials, press release, talking points for our CEO, CFO. I mainly work with the office of the CFO. How are we going to tell the narrative of what happened during the quarter, and
Mhm.
positioning us if it's, a quarter where we lost money, which doesn't happen very often unless, we're in COVID. But explaining to investors in the business community about what happened and why they should have confidence in our management team, in the company, and our future decisions.
Okay. So tell us a bit about your journey. You went to the University of Guelph,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're at GM. So that's a bit of a journey. So just give us a bit of a road trip type of thing that
Sure.
happened.
It
Yeah.
actually is a bit of a road trip.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You need to follow along on this one. Um, so started at University of Guelph, degrees in economics and finance. Um, didn't really know what I wanted to do after that. While I was in college, my dad got transferred to the US. So when I graduated, I'm like, okay, I can either stay in Canada and build a life or get a green card and go to the US and figure things out from there. So uh, that's what I decided to do, not knowing what was going to be next. This is in 2011, 2012. So not long after the financial crisis, weren't a whole lot of jobs. My dream was always to be a news anchor, so I decided to go back to school. So I went to the University of Missouri to do a master's degree in business journalism, broadcast journalism with a focus on business because of my background. And from there, I got my first internship with Bloomberg in Washington, D.C. Then CNBC picked me up, and then they gave me my first full time job as a producer in New York City, which, I mean, the stories that I have and what I've experienced and people I met, like, I learned an incredible amount through those experiences. Uh, Loved it, but um, I just knew that it wasn't entirely for me. I wanted to get back to instead of chasing down the narrative, I want it to be the driving force behind the narrative. So I applied to General Motors and I actually started in manufacturing, which I think is one of the best ways to start, especially in communications, so you can understand, the backbone of the organization and how things are run. So I was in manufacturing for a year and a half at the Corvette plant in Bowling Green and SUV plant and engine plant in Tennessee. And after about a year and a half of that, I got transferred up to headquarters in Detroit, doing sales communications for the company. And last summer, they transferred me into finance communications. So I've been doing that for about a year now. Um, and I mean, how I got here, it was just, jumping on opportunities as they came, positioning myself and making sure I had the right experiences to get where I want it to be. And where I am today, I think it's the perfect combination of my journalism degree, finance and economics. Um, and it's a lot of fun. I get exposure to, a lot of high profile people at the company. I get to see how decisions are made on a global scale. We're a global company, of course. So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
So I know COVID's a huge deal, but what about what do you think the big issues are in terms of keeping costs down, staying competitive in the auto sector? Because I'm sure every company's trying to figure out how to keep the cost of a car down on a global scale.
Sure. So I'd just like to remind everyone that these are Lauren's opinions, not General Motors opinions. Based on my experience,
Hmm.
uh, automotive is a very capital intensive business, as you all know. Excuse me. Um, so keeping costs down. I mean, you mentioned in your book, labor is a huge cost. So that's something that we have to deal with. Um, uh, Inputs, commodities that go into our vehicles. That's another thing that we're always hedging against. Um, a major thing that I don't think is talked about a whole lot is that we build where we sell. So the vehicles that we're selling in North America, we're typically building here. The vehicles that we sell in China, we're building there. And that is a hedge against foreign exchange rates, which is another huge consideration. So, I mean, in terms of cost, uh, there is a lot going on, and just structuring your business and your balance sheet to be able to survive a downturn is very important as well. Um, Obviously, in 2008, we are a very different company than we are today. Uh, we took a lot of learnings from 2008 and applied that to the way we make decisions. And I mean, we were down this past quarter. We lost 8 weeks of production, and that's how we book revenue. We book revenue when we build cars. It's actually not sales at the dealership where we make money. Um, so even though we lost such a big portion of our production, which, I mean, I don't even remember when we were down for that long. You know, the results of the quarter showed the resilience of the business, and so just having a good management team, making the right cost decisions. Yeah, there's
Yeah, well, the thing is, it is about costs, or you get sunk pretty quick.
yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think people forget that when you have a scale that's large, it just means that the down can be much worse
Hmm.
because it's just magnified. So at the end of the day, so you see it turning around now,
What turning it around? How?
like COVID is turning around.
I mean, we're back up to full production, which is fantastic. Can't predict what's going to happen next. I mean, of course, COVID hit Asia first, so China was down. They came back up and running as it was really affecting the United States and North America. Um, but we learned a lot of things from them getting back up to production over there that we were able to apply here. And also, as soon as the pandemic started, Mary Barra, who's our chairman and CEO, made the decision to start building ventilators and masks. So I mean, within I believe it was a month, we converted one of our facilities to be building these very intricate, ventilators. And we had to have people going into the plant for that. So in order to be back up and running, I mean, COVID is still very real today, and safety is a top priority for General Motors, even like before COVID. Like it's really ingrained into that. We're not going to do anything without keeping our employees safe, without making sure that our vehicles are safe for customers. So we weren't going to be back up and running until we figured out how to keep employees safe when they enter the plant, while they're working, and when they leave. But looking at what's called US SAR, which is the seasonally adjusted rate of sales in the US. It's basically how many cars industry sells um, in a given time period. And that is definitely showing signs of recovery, substantial signs of recovery. So people are, they're buying vehicles again. Dealerships are opening back up. There's also a lot of new innovations in that space too. I mean, we've always had the option to do a lot of the buying experience online, and we're seeing a shift in people, using our shop click drive technology to buy vehicles and things like that, so they don't have to
Mm,
go in and be in
wow.
contact with other people.
Hmm.
Well, that's an interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think COVID has totally changed how people buy. Like
Yep.
online is just going to be this huge permanent, like it's not going to go back. I know that I was talking to somebody who was saying, "Oh, it was so nice to see my doctor over Zoom. Why are we ever going to go back to the waiting room?" Because
Right.
all I needed was a prescription, and you have to see the person to get the prescription. So
Mhm.
I think that even in other sectors, there's going to be why go back to doing it that way when it's unnecessary? We figured out another way to do it, so let's do it this way.
Well, even the way
Laura,
that we do business, like forgetting the production side, even the folks in the office, we've been working from home since March. Every single day we've been working at home, and we have been just as productive, if not more productive. You eliminate the commute. You eliminate, I mean, you might have other distractions at home, but you eliminate distractions that you might have at work. You get up and you start working. And so I don't think we're ever going to go back to the 5-day workday week. And COVID's proven that we don't have to. So,
I was going to ask you. I imagine like the way a company communicates how they're dealing with a crisis has impact on the brand perception, right? In the market, right? I guess. So, how do you sort of communicate that, or what's creating a narrative about what's going on now to help GM?
how do we
Like
create a narrative about?
about say when crisis like this to sort
Yeah.
of so that because the way a company handles something like this or just communicates where they're at, I guess that affects trust, investor trust or public trust, so that they'll keep wanting to buy your vehicles, right?
Right. And like I said before, our top priority is, employee safety and safety of
Right.
customers. So um, we have been very public about what we're doing at our manufacturing facilities to keep people safe. And those methods are working. I mean, my dad and my brother both work at GM plants as well. Um, and the protocols are pretty extensive. But also, I mean, on the customer front, we have different clean initiative programs at dealerships to make sure that customers are comfortable when they're buying their vehicles. So, but we also, I mean, we also took this as an opportunity. Like you said, we have the scale. We also have this incredible global network in our supply chain. So in terms of like ventilator production, we were able to tap into that network that we have to figure out, and we're experts in manufacturing and setting up manufacturing lines.
Mm.
So there were just a lot of things that we were able to just jump into and do,
Yeah.
um, not only to make sure that our employees and customers were taken care of, but using our scale and power to help society.
Yeah.
So that's sort of an interesting thought. It just came to me as you were talking that when we talk about supply, we often in economics make it sound like this instant thing. But,
Right.
and then we talk about short run and long run. And short run is when capital is fixed, and long run is when capital can be made flexible. In a typical story of a line, whatever your vehicle is, how long is it from beginning to end before the first car comes off the line? Like, what's your short run to long run look like?
So when you start building the vehicle to when it rolls off,
Let's do two. The concept of a vehicle to build it to deciding that this plant is now going to produce a vehicle of a certain type.
yeah. That takes years.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert in that area. Um, but yeah, from concept to where we're going to build to when it rolls off the line. I mean, that those are big decisions, big investments that need to be made. And it's not only thinking about, what's going to be the most cost effective, but there's also political considerations that you have to make, especially, where we are today. Um, there's also a lot of things that you can't predict who's going to be in office, so um, but if I guess my experience is more in the shorter term. I ran around in plants for almost 2 years, it's absolutely, if you ever get a chance to get into a vehicle manufacturing plant, it's absolutely incredible to see how cars are made, and what goes into it. But once we have all the inputs, I mean, you have, um, some stuff we make on our own. Parts or different components of the vehicle, or some we outsource because it's cheaper to do that. So we have like a stamping factory. So we'll get sheet metal to come in, and we have stamping plants that are stamping these big, pieces of sheet metal into doors or hoods or whatever it is. Um, so we have processes like that. We have the body shop where we're actually, welding the body of the car together. We have the paint shop where we're obviously painting the car, or the panels of the car. And then we have general assembly, which is where I'd say most of our labor is used in putting the car together, a combination of, both robots and labor. Depending on what vehicle it is, if you're looking at like a Corvette, which is much more intricate and complex with a lot more options than, say, a Chevrolet Malibu, a Corvette might take 2 to 3 days from the beginning of the line to the end of the line. If you're looking at something like, a pickup truck, it could, beginning to end, it could go, through the plant in the course of a day. So it all depends on the vehicle. It depends on the inputs. Now we're getting into, we're going from ICE vehicles, which stands for internal combustion engines, to EVs, electric vehicles.
Yeah.
So that's changing the entire landscape of how we manufacture. Now, we have to source batteries, and we don't need engines or transmissions anymore. So yeah, a lot's changing, and the length of time and how we do things is evolving every single day.
Yeah, so productivity is important. Like, so do you do kind of, you measure how long it takes for each part to be done? Like, this takes 5 minutes, this takes 2 minutes. Like, do you actually know how long things take to do?
Um, Everything is down to a very precise science. That is for sure. We have this thing when at the plant, it's called a footprint. So it's like there's a piece of tape on the ground in one spot, a piece of tape on the ground in the other spot. You have the car, the car continues to move on the line, and you have to finish your job or series of jobs within that footprint. And that footprint, it can be as short as 30 seconds where you have to get everything done. Um, that's more if you're working on an engine line, you'd have to do your job as quickly as that until it goes to the next footprint. If you're looking at the Corvette plant, you have more like 2 to 3 minutes in that footprint to get all of your jobs done because of the complexity of what you're doing. So yeah, it all depends. We're always looking at ways to increase productivity because we want to pump out cars as fast as we can. But again, most important thing is safety. After safety, it's quality. So we're not going to sacrifice either of those two things just to put more out there.
Mm-hmm. So do you own a Corvette?
I'm wearing the shirt.
Yeah.
It is my favorite vehicle. The mid-engine just came out recently. I do not own a Corvette. I do own a Volt, which is a hybrid of. It has a battery in it, as well as a gasoline engine. So it goes for about 60 miles. So just over 100, 120 kilometers on a charge, and then it converts to gas. So for me, it was important to experience and be a part of the future of mobility, which is electric. And it's pretty cool. I mean, you turn my car on, you don't hear it. You don't hear it on the
Mm.
road. I don't pay for gas because I'm not typically driving more than 120 kilometers on a charge. We don't make Volts anymore because we're going completely all electric. We just revealed the Cadillac Lyric, which is our all electric SUV. We have an all electric Hummer that's yet to be revealed later this year. But it's pretty incredible what we're doing in that space. I mean, the electric Hummer, it's going to have 1,000 horsepower. Um,
Wow.
I've seen it. We haven't revealed it yet. Again, it's coming. But the innovation that's happening in this space is pretty incredible. But there's a lot that needs to happen to get there. It's not just
Yeah.
uh, the products; it's the infrastructure.
Yes,
How are we going to charge
the
these
charging
things?
stations,
So
yeah.
have you so have you over the years like increased your research and development, or have you shifted your research and development um, in terms of electric vehicles? Is it just a
Again,
shift of focus, or is it like you really ramped up because of the competition?
I I mean, I couldn't answer that from a company's perspective, but from what we're talking about, we've shifted, especially a lot of our engineering resources to electric because that
Mm,
is the future. I mean, General Motors talks about a world with zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion.
mm,
And to get there, you need to have fully electric vehicles and you need to have autonomous vehicles, which
mhm.
blows some people's minds. But the reality is, we're going to have electric autonomous vehicles on the road a lot sooner than most people think. So that's
I'd
what we're
love
focused
that.
on.
Just get in the back and
Yeah,
sit back and take me wherever I want to go.
Actually, I
well,
think for our generation, it's gonna be great because, as people age, they get their license taken away from them, right?
yeah,
Because
Yeah.
yep,
and we'll be able to keep driving because we don't have the problem of, eye-hand coordination issues because our vehicle will do it for us.
yeah.
So I'm actually really looking forward to this.
Yeah. It
My
seems like it's
grandfather keeps
still
telling me
kind
to
of
hurry it up because he wants to get in one of those autonomous vehicles. I mean, in San Francisco, we have vehicles on the road without a steering wheel and without pedals. They're not available commercially or they're for testing only. But that stuff is out there already. So
I can't imagine how though, like, I always just so like, how's this okay, California can work, but how does this work in Canada? But, I guess there's smart people coming up with
mhm.
solutions for this, like how you're gonna work in the snow and these icy
Yeah.
icy conditions, right? I mean, that is probably a big obstacle for those cars, right?
Yeah, and it's not like a switch overnight. I mean, if you could get some autonomous technology today, if you go to a Cadillac dealership and
Mm.
buy our flagship Cadillac CT6 sedan, it's
I don't
equipped
think
with,
that's gonna happen to me, that's above my pay grade.
but that's equipped with a technology called Super Cruise. And if you've ever used cruise control in your car,
Mhm.
it's the same concept, except you don't need to take your feet off the pedal; you take your hands off the wheel. And it drives for you. We just added lane assist. So if you want to change lanes, you just put your signal on, and when the road's clear, your car will actually change lanes for you. So it's not autonomous, but it's those steps toward it to get customers comfortable with that. And I've used the technology, and I mean, pressing that button and then taking your hands and feet off the wheel and just sitting there. It's a little intimidating, but you get used to it pretty quickly, and it's incredible.
I think like anything, when it's thrust upon you, I mean, I'm not a technical person, but through this COVID situation, I've actually learned how to, you know, use microphones and webcams and,
Yep.
video editing and which I didn't know how to do before. So now even with COVID, my banking e-transfers are now the way to do it. And if someone sends me a check, I take a picture. Like I've been forced to
Yeah.
be a move
Mhm.
ahead. And if you don't get forced, sometimes people resist. So like with cruise control, I never use cruise control. I don't like the feeling of doing that. But my husband uses it all the time because he travels long distance. He goes,
Right.
I just don't want a sore leg,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
so I think sometimes what happens is when something's forced upon you, you suddenly make the change. So maybe
Mhm.
government is really important here. They're forcing change. Like I think California is going to force it, right? That they have to have
Of
electric
course, which
vehicle. for electric
Sorry?
vehicles. Electric vehicles, I think, are like, aren't some states making them mandatory?
Yeah, so I mean, going back to some of the things that affect supply for government involvement, that was actually one of my examples that I was going to bring up. So, um, government regulations such as emissions and fuel economy is huge, and it forces automakers to consider where they're going to allocate their capital, and how to design their supply chains for future vehicles. So that's something that we're facing today. And like I mentioned, with the transition from ICE to EVs. Again, internal combustion engines, which uses gasoline, to all electric. Um, I mean, GM was way ahead of that. We're putting significant investment into electric vehicles, not only building the vehicles, but we're partnering for charging stations, around the U.S. But not every OEM, which stands for original equipment manufacturer. So other automakers, not everyone has the capital or the
Mhm.
willingness or technology to do that, and they need to be forced to do it, right?
Mhm.
But if you have a company that is investing into something that others aren't, I mean, we're making a bet on the future, but we're also taking away capital from other things that we can be doing today. Um, so
So
really,
there's an opportunity cost. There's a
absolutely, yep.
yes.
But we want future regulatory framework to help transition the industry to EVs. And there's been a bit of that. I mean, there's been, and I believe this was in Canada too, but you'd get, if you bought an electric vehicle, you'd get a check from the government for doing
Yeah.
that. So anything that promotes the transition to EVs is something we're absolutely on board with.
Yes. Wow, this has been a very interesting conversation, in terms of kind of the big sector that
Hmm.
affects a lot of lives. And I
Yep.
know sometimes people think about trade agreements and they think, oh, you need to manufacture domestically. And so I guess one of the ways you've worked around for exchange rate hedges is that you manufacture where you sell.
Hmm.
But there's still the whole sector, it's bigger than just making the cars or the vehicles.
Yep.
It's everybody involved in, all the way up the supply chain to where they sell them and service
Hmm.
them. And
Yep.
so you have a sector that is pretty huge in,
Hmm.
terms of Canada and the United States gross domestic product. So, um,
Yeah.
this has been
It's
interesting.
it's so fascinating though, I think too, just from a human behavior standpoint. It's just hassles sometimes just cause you to adapt in a positive way, like Evie was saying. And you were saying about regulations. It's interesting. Probably at first, people, oh, it's a drag, regulations.
Hmm.
But you can either respond and be creative and see that as a opportunity to do something really cool. Which
Yep.
obviously electric vehicles, that's got to be exciting for engineers and everybody to develop, right? I'd
Hmm.
think you'd be at the forefront, right? But it's a hassle at first, all these things. And same with like things like COVID, right? Like Evie was saying, it's a hassle. Oh, I gotta do this, but it actually is good, right? It's good for everybody.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
what COVID has done too, it's forced us to innovate in ways that we wouldn't have ever done before. And I think
Mhm.
that's true for anyone, even in our daily lives, right? And an example of this, not necessarily having to do with the supply curve, but as soon as this started, we implemented zero-based budgeting, which is a term that's kind of become a buzzword for a lot of big companies. And what that is instead of having a budget and seeing, okay, how are we going to allocate all of our capital and resources, you go to zero, and it's like, okay, what do we really need in order to be successful, um, to win in the future. So that's been a shift for us. I mean, I don't work directly in finance, so I'm not exactly sure what the decisions are that are being made in that space. But I just know that that's one way that we've changed things to
Mhm.
figure out, okay, what costs can we take out beyond what we thought we couldn't live without.
Well, one thing for sure, when you have a disaster like this, you wanna figure out how to survive.
Hmm.
And surviving, I mean, you have to protect the goose, right? Gotta
Mhm.
make
Yeah.
sure that these eggs keep getting laid, so you gotta make sure that, there's a l that everyone is on board with keeping,
Yeah.
something from going under, and, sometimes people don't move quick enough, they just keep doing
Mhm.
it the old way, and then
Yep.
they realize that was a mistake, so you're
Yeah.
actually saying that a lot of the car companies, which are huge, have become quite nimble.
Yeah.
Um, I'd say GM has become nimble.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
I can't speak for the others, but,
No.
Yeah,
um, I mean, if this hit us, you know, I mean, we went bankrupt in 2008, right? So, um, and essentially we went through a similar situation. It was just condensed a lot. 2008 was a prolonged recession. This was a very short, deep lived recession.
yes.
Um, and we were able to get through it because of the way that we've structured our business. So,
I
So
was
good
I
for
was
you. So tell
yeah.
your CEO, "Good
Yeah.
job."
Yeah, good job. I was just thinking, you mentioned something about I mean, big input is labor. I imagine a lot of, the relationship with between labor and business has got to be have a lot of thought, right? Because people are being laid off, their
yep,
jobs are changing. Like you these nursing homes in Canada, we're relooking at who are the people we're hiring and how are they getting paid and all that. So that's got to be a huge um, thing you're thinking about, right, in terms of finances.
for sure. Yeah. And making sure that we have the right people for the right jobs. And, um, I can't remember if it was a year or 2 years ago, but like I said, we made an intentional shift to um, really focus a lot of our engineering talent on electrification and autonomous strategies. I can't remember the exact ratio, but I believe it was like 80% was working on traditional ICE vehicles technology, and 20% was working on electric. And we
Mm,
actually swapped that so that 80% of our engineering development R&D workforce is focused on electric and autonomous, and 20% is on ICE.
yeah.
Because the thing is, the vehicles that we still need to sell, develop, manufacture um, the vehicles that everyone drives today, because we're not ready to make that full transition to electric. So
Mhm.
yeah, labor is something we're definitely thinking about. And electric vehicles are going to be more complex. We're driving computers now, and that requires, I think, a different skill set to manufacture those vehicles. So just looking at what are we going to need to build those vehicles of the future.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
I guess I just wanna end with one little, sort of positive. So you really feel that, taking, an economics and finance degree helps you in this particular job, which is actually writing and public
Mhm.
relations, right? So you're one of the few people who has this background in your group?
Yeah, our communications department is over 100. I mean, GM has a fairly large communications department, which is different from marketing, which a lot of people confuse.
Mhm.
So communications, public relations, media relations is what we do, and everything else is assigned. But yeah, having the degree that I have, I mean, there's a lot that I've learned on the job, but having this background has helped me in ways that I never would have imagined. And I guess I have two examples. One, we have a chief economist at General Motors, and because of my background, I've kind of become her. Um, she gets quoted in the media. We get requests, to speak to our chief economist, Elaine Buckberg, and I'm kind of the conduit of, okay, should we put her out there? What should we be saying? Um, and I can just tap into Elaine whenever I need to say, okay, can you give me an update? How are interest rates affecting vehicle demand right now? And I'm able to ask those questions because of the understanding that I have, so that shows up a lot there. And also, I mean, I got an email from the Wall Street Journal yesterday, actually. They're writing a story on how GM uses game theory and risk management.
Oh, cool.
So, not sure if that's something that we're going to respond to. I need to dig into it. I have no idea how or what we do there. But I mean, I took game theory in undergrad. So, it
Mhm.
shows up in ways that, um, I think a lot of people would be like, okay, what the heck is she talking about? But I knew who to go to, and I'm like, hey, maybe there's a good story to tell here.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, but even like, I have to just writing the press release for earnings, or I mean, I had to do. We issued $4 billion of bonds a few months ago to make sure that the liquidity of the company was strong enough to withstand this. Um, so a lot of the things that I learned in my economics courses showed up there to understand, okay, how I had to become the expert when media called to talk about it, drawing down on our revolving credit facilities. I mean, everything we do in, any global company is going to touch on economics. So having that background definitely gives me something that a lot of others don't. So
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Lauren. This was
Yeah.
I think this was a convoluted, we meandered a bit, but definitely interesting conversation, and it definitely shows that making cars is kind of complicated. And,
extremely.
yeah, and,
Yeah.
uh, and companies wanna make a profit, which means they have to figure out smart ways to make cars, so, and keeping costs down and keeping quality up and having safety by everybody, so um, all of these goals, go into the product is not just a car,
Right.
it's bigger than a car, so,
Yeah.
anyway, this was great. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks.
Anytime.